Welcome back everyone to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial, and in today's video we shall work on network replication so that our inventory system would work in the multiplayer mode. This tutorial was requested by my Patreons, and if you want me to post videos more frequently, make sure you subscribe, join my Discord channel, and perhaps support me on Patreon as well. The first thing that we need to keep in mind of is that once we are in a networked game, all of the game happens only on the server. Nothing that you see on your screen is actually happening on your device. All of it, pretty much all of it, is happening on the server side. Basically, all the characters are there, all the pickups are there, everything is on the server, and you just simply have server has granted you the access to control one of its pawns. So with that in mind, every time that we spawn a actor or change something in the game, if we want everyone to see it, we gotta make sure that server does it and it gives the information throughout the network. I believe this will make more sense once we actually get into replicating things. So let's begin. The first thing that we want to do is obviously make so that we can test the online version. So what we want to do is over here we want to set this to be I usually test it with 3 players so that I can see how the clients interact with one another, and also we need to set the net mode to be the listen server. So once we have done that, we can press play. And as you can see, we have the big guy, which is the server, and we have 2 clients. But as you can see, nothing is really happening on the client side. And that is because by default, we have this third-person character, which has been dragged into the world as a regular actor. We don't want that. So let's delete him, and let's add the player start location. This will now allow us to spawn all of our characters. So as you can see, we have 3 of these guys over here. Now, if we try to pick up a backpack as our client, the client sees it on the back of him, but nobody else sees it. Also, if we pick up an item, it does appear on our inventory. Everything is good. So let's perhaps try to drop it somewhere over here, let's say. You can see it did get dropped, but if we select the other character, nothing's really changed. The backpack's still there, the pickup's still there, and there's no pickup over there. That's because everything got run on the local space and the server has not been informed about the changes. So first, let's work on our backpack and let's make sure that our backpack is getting replicated. To do so, let's go to our backpack master, and also let's go to our third-person character because we will need to work in both of these blueprints. Now let's see. The first thing what we probably want to do is let's start with something a little more simple. Let's work on our drop function. So let's drag these 2 nodes back a little bit, and what we want to do over here is simply disconnect all of these pins, and we want to create a new custom event. So add custom event, and let's call this server spawn backpack. There we go. Let's connect the execution. Now let's create some inputs. What we need is the spawn transform, so let's drag it in. We also need the player slots. Let's drag those in, and we need a target that we want to destroy, as in our previous backpack that was on the back of our character. And what I want to do is change the name from the target to, let's call this backpack. What you want to make sure of is that you compile this now, because if we would now, let's say, run this, so from our is valid, we want to run that, so server spawn backpack. If we do not compile this after we change a name of a pin, this node will give us an error. So now let's see, we want to connect our spawn transform, we want to connect our player slots, and we want to connect our backpack as well. There we go. So it should look something like this on this side, but you perhaps already noticed that if we compile this, this node gives us a note that no value will be returned by reference. This is actually a glitch that does give us issues, and as long as this note is over there, and that this is a glitch since I believe 4.19 of Unreal Engine versions. But there is a quick workaround this. What we want to do is drop down our RI. This only usually happens with the RIs from what I've noticed. What you want to do is check this thing called pass by reference, compile it, it's gone, then we can uncheck this and recompile this once more, and everything is working just fine. And one last thing that we want to do to make sure that this spawning and destroying the previous actor does actually work, we want to set our replication to be ran on server. So now our server is going to spawn us a new backpack once we drop the old one and destroy the old backpack. There we go. So now this functionality should work just fine. And now we want to probably work on the function that is allowing us to actually pick our backpack up. So to do so, let's go to our backpack master. And what we want to do over here is I'm going to hold Control and select these nodes right here. I'm going to copy these and I'm going to move these to our third person character like so. And over here, what we want to do is we want to create two custom events. So let's create the first custom event and let's call this multi server, actually multi spawn backpack. And this event will be multicasted across the network. So let's connect our execution over here. And what we want to do next is select our target, which is going to be our attachable. I hope it's a word. I'm not sure. So this is basically going to be the thing that we are going to attach to our character, as in our backpack. Then we need a parent, which is going to be our player mesh. And we also want to have this uses the scene component and this uses a primitive component, and we cannot plug in the scene component into the primitive component, but both of these are using the same component. So I'm going to drag from the primitive one, connect it, and I'm going to rename this to be the let's call this simply component. There we go. So now we can plug this inside of our set world scale as well. It works just fine. And we also need our new scale to have a vector which is resizing our backpack once it's on top of our character. Actually, I want to rename this to be, this does not spawn, this is the multi attach backpack. And then what we want is another custom event, and this event will be called server attach backpack. There we go. So server attach backpack. And now from this event right here, we want to run our multi attach backpack. And over here, we're going to do this pretty simple. We're just going to simply connect our inputs right here into over here, which automatically will create all of the pins that we need just fine. So now every time we run this thing, it's going to tell our server, hey, listen, we want to attach a backpack and multicast this along our network. But to make it actually do so, we need to set its parameters to do so. So let's select this first node and let's set the replication to be ran on server. And then the server is going to run the multicast event, which needs to be set to multicast. So this should work just fine. Now let's set everything up in our backpack master, because we no longer want to use these nodes over here. So let's move these out of the way. And as our player, what we want to do is run our server attach backpack event function. And then let's see. So we need the attachable, which is our equipped backpack. Player mesh is our mesh. The component is our static mesh component. So let's use this one over here. And also we need our default scale to have the new scale pin filled in. There we go. And now we can simply remove these nodes right here. Let's try this out. Let's see. Always make sure you do most of your testing on the client side, because that's usually where most of the issues will happen. So let's pick up a backpack. There we go. The backpack got picked up. We have it. If we drop it, oh, this does not work just like I expected. So if we spam the B key, you can see it's spawning us many backpacks. So, and it's giving us an error, backpack master, blah blah blah. Doesn't really matter. So the issue is that as of right now, we are not replicating our variables. And in this case, I believe this is the variable that's giving us the issue, the equipped backpack variable. But since we already know that we're going to need to replicate quite a few variables, let's begin one by one. First, let's go in our backpack master and let's replicate our player slots, since we want the items that are inside of our backpack to stay in the backpack once we drop it. So let's select the variable. Let's go to over here and let's select this replication to be replicated. There we go. And we want to do the same thing in our third person character. We want to replicate our player slots. So let's make sure we replicate these. Equip backpack. oh, I guess I've done this. Make sure you replicate all of these. The only thing we don't need to replicate is our UI variable. So let's replicate all of these 4 variables right here. And there is one more thing that we always want to replicate is the actor itself. So now in our backpack master, what we want to do is select the base self reference. And if we go down a little bit, you can see there is this section called replication. If we are using physics on an actor, which we are with our backpack, we want to always replicate the movement. And also we want to replicate this whole actor by itself as well. So we want to check these two. Also, what we want to do is select our static mesh component and scroll down, down till we see the component replication, and we want to check this as well. And we want to do this for all of our components that might be changing their values throughout the gameplay. So let's say if we are changing the scaling, we are changing the model or whatever, we want to replicate them components as well. So now, once we have replicated all the things, checked all the replication checks, we should be able to pick up ourselves a backpack. There we go. We got a backpack. All of the characters sees that we have a backpack on the back of our character, and if we drop it, it gets dropped over there. This guy can come up, pick it up. Let's see, does this will work now? We have 2 items in it. Let's drop it. Let's go with this guy. Let's pick it up. Yes, it does work. It does save us our equipment pieces, but as you can see, these things are still here. So now we can have 4 pieces. We can drop it, and then as a server we can walk up to these, pick 2 more, and basically from 2 we went up to 6. So let's fix the issues with our pickups, and to do so we shall go to our pickup master. And let's see. So the first thing what we probably want to do, just like in the previous actor, we want to select the self-reference, we want to replicate the movement and replicate the component, the actor itself, and also we want to replicate the static mesh component. So let's go down and let's replicate that one as well. I'm not going to replicate the collision box since I'm not going to change any values on this throughout the gameplay. It's going to stay static, the same size for all of my items. So once we have done that, what we also would like to do probably is replicate our item information itself. So let's replicate this variable so that we know that we are changing the values, if we are changing the values real time, so that we would know that. And now in our event graph, the only thing that we want to replicate over here is this destruction of the actor. So let's go to our third-person character. And again, let's create a new event. So let me create one over here. So custom event, and let's call this server destroy actor. And this function we will be able to reuse across the many uses that we might find across our gameplay to destroy actors in the server. So what we want to do over here is add a new entry to this. Let's call this actor. The type also needs to be an actor. Then we want to make sure that this event is ran on server, and then we can destroy the actor, and that's as simple as it gets. Ran on server, and the server is destroying our actor. So now in our pickup master, instead of simply destroying the actor, what we want to do is, as our player, we want to run our server destroy actor. The actor reference is referenced to ourselves, since this is the specific pickup that we want the server to destroy. And now once everything is being replicated, our pickups should disappear across the entire network. So let's make sure it does. Let's turn our heads over there, and as you can see, we pick up 1, pick up 2, and they are getting destroyed. There we go. So this is getting replicated just properly. But now we have another replication issue, is that if we drop things, nobody sees that we dropped anything. Now, so that we would be able to actually spawn a pickup and drop it on the ground, what we want to do is to create another custom event, and let's call this server spawn item. And this event will, like it says, it will spawn us an item. And of course, this needs to be ran on server, and we want to spawn actor from class. The actor is our master pickup master. Let's split the transform pins. So we need the location and we need the item itself. And that's going to be all that we need in this function right here as of right now. So we can compile and save this. And let's go to our Dropbox, which is actually doing the dropping part. So let's have a look at our Dropbox UI. In the graph on drop, we are running this event, this node, which basically does the same thing, but this only gets ran on the local space. So let's look for our character, third-person character reference. So this one over here, and I have one over here. And as our third-person character, we want to do our server spawn item. We want to connect, so I'm going to hold control, reconnect the transform, and reconnect the item. And I'm also going to reconnect the execution pins, like so. Remove the previous node, move this into its location. And now let's try this once more. So now if we pick up an item, you can see that if we try to drop it, there we go, it gets dropped on the ground. We can pick it back up, drop it once more, pick it once more, and anybody can come up to it and pick it up. So another thing replicated. And now the last thing that it's left for us to replicate is our equipment. So let me duplicate some of my equipment pieces so that we have plenty. Let's go to our third-person character again. And inside of here, what I want to do is again have two events. Let's right click, custom event. Let's call this server, add equip visual. This event needs to be run on server. And the other event, again, custom event. So let's call this multi, add equip visual, which is a multicasted event. And from this event, what we want to run is our equipment visuals function. So here we want to connect our isEquipping, our item, and this slot index. One more thing that we want to do, since we are multicasting across the entire network, we need to specify the player that we are attaching the equipment to. So if we select this function node right here, we can add a new pin to this function and a new input. Let's call this player, and let's make sure that this is our third-person character. At least in my case, in your case it might be a different character, but I'm using the third-person character. Let's connect our player to this one as well, and then from our server function we can run our multicast, add equipment visuals. Again, connect all the pins like so. So now we are going to ask our server to equip, to run our multicasted event, which is going to multicast across the entire network, and it's going to replicate our equipment visual part. So let's open up our equipment visuals, and inside of here, what we want to do to make life easier for us again, let's promote our player to a local variable, and let's call this local player. Let's connect the execution pins so that it actually does get saved. Now let's go to let's start with the bottom one. What we want to do is replace our equipment visuals variable with a one from our local player. So let's get our local player, and then from our local player, let's get our equipment visuals and reconnect this to our get node. So now we can get rid of this variable right here. And now the next thing that we want to do is actually remove this node entirely, because in the single player it was working just fine, but in the multiplayer our server first does this whole part and it removes the entry from our array. So later on, once the client is getting the multicast node, the multicast information, it's trying to look for the same entry in the array, but it's no longer there. So we want to delete this node, and we actually don't really need it. This array is just for our reference, so that we can keep tabs on what kind of equipment we have, so that we can actually destroy it later on. So now the next thing that we want to do is do the same thing over here with our local players. So let's copy these two nodes over here, since we want to get this player's equipment visuals. So let's connect it, remove this part, drag this down a little bit, and also as our local player we want to get the mesh of our character. Somewhere at the bottom is get mesh, and now we can replace this with the previous one, like so. There we go, and I believe we are all good with this function. Now, the only thing that's left for us to do is, instead of running our equipment visuals functions straight away, we want to run our server add equipment visuals. And we have two locations where we are running our equipment visuals function. One of those is add item to equipment. Over here you can see we have our equipment visuals function. So over here what we want to do is, as our player, we actually don't need a reference, so we can simply just, since we are already in the third person character, we can look for our server add equipment visual. Let's make sure we do the same values. So let's reconnect our execution pins. Let's check this to be true. Item, slot index, and we can remove the previous node, move this into its location, and we want to have the player reference, and since we are in the correct player, we can just simply provide self node. Now we have one more location for the unequipping, and that one is in our remove amount at index. Over here the same thing, right click, server, add equipment visuals, reconnect the pins, so holding control, item, slot, remove the previous node, move this into its place, and the player is self. There we go. So now I believe everything should be replicating just fine. Let's try this out and let's see how this actually works. So let's select our player. Let's take a weapon, some swords. Let's add a vest to this. It seems to be working just fine. Let's try some more with this guy right here. Let's pick up a backpack on him. Let's stand over here perhaps so that everybody can see. So we have our vest, we have a weapon 1, we have a weapon 2, we have an arm piece. So I believe everything seems to be working just fine. Now if we try to drop these, they're still getting dropped, and everything seems to be working just fine. Now the other characters can walk up to these items, pick them up, and of course on the server side, most of the time everything is going to be working just fine. And like I said, most of the issues are only going to happen on the client side. So no errors, everything seems to be working. I believe just about everything is replicated that was necessary to be replicated. So that's going to be it for replications video for now. Later on we will add some more features, so there's going to come some even more replication functions that are going to be necessary. If you have any more suggestions, any questions, leave a comment down below, join my Discord, support me on Patreon, and make sure you subscribe to help the channel grow. See you guys in the next video.